What you are about to see is one of the most striking encounters between law enforcement and the judiciary ever recorded. When this 38-year-old police officer entered Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom and made the critical error of debating legal principles with the judge, the outcome not only ended his career, but became a lasting example of respect, authority, and the battles that should never be taken on. This story highlights what occurs when badge-driven arrogance meets decades of judicial experience. It demonstrates that wearing a uniform does not grant limitless authority, and that enforcing the law is very different from interpreting it. Before we dive into this extraordinary courtroom moment, a quick note: less than 3% of viewers are subscribed. Please hit the subscribe button so this story about professional limits and the consequences of challenging judicial authority can reach those who need to see it. It's a typical Wednesday morning at Providence Municipal Court. Judge Frank Caprio is handling his usual docket of traffic violations and minor municipal cases. The early spring air hints at warmer days ahead, but inside the courtroom, tension is about to rise. At precisely 10:45 a.m., the courtroom doors swing open with a noticeable authority. In walks Officer Derek Thompson, a 38-year-old sergeant with the Providence Police Department. Thompson moves with the confidence of someone convinced that his badge grants him privileges in any situation. His uniform is immaculate, his boots polished to a shine, and his posture exudes the kind of superiority shaped by years of being the authority figure in every interaction. Officer Thompson is here today because 3 weeks ago, he received a citation for parking in a handicapped space while off duty. The incident took place outside Tony's restaurant, where Thompson had stopped for lunch in his personal vehicle. The fine is the standard $300 plus court costs. However, Thompson isn't here to pay the ticket. He believes that his position in law enforcement should exempt him from what he considers civilian parking rules. What he doesn't realize is that he's about to face a judge who has been interpreting and applying the law long before Thompson was old enough to drive, much less wear a badge. As Thompson approaches the defendant's stand, his posture sets a confrontational tone. He keeps his police cap on, stands casually rather than at attention, and leaves his badge prominently displayed, almost as if to remind the courtroom of his authority. The court clerk announces, reading from the docket, Officer Derek Thompson. Thompson steps forward, clearly impatient, one hand resting on his duty belt in a gesture that comes across as more intimidating than respectful. Judge Caprio lifts his eyes from his paperwork, observing with the practiced scrutiny of someone who has handled every type of defendant, including law enforcement officers who assume their badges place them above the law. Officer Thompson. Judge Caprio begins, his voice steady and authoritative, reflecting 35 years on the bench. You are charged with parking in a handicapped space while off duty, in violation of City Ordinance 127. This violation occurred on March 15th at 1:30 p.m. outside Tony's restaurant. How do you plead? Thompson's reply immediately signals that this will be an unusual case. Your Honor, he begins, his tone carrying the air of someone explaining an obvious fact to a child. I am pleading not guilty because this citation reflects a fundamental misapplication of parking enforcement rules as they pertain to sworn law enforcement officers. Judge Caprio sets down his pen, a subtle warning to defendants who presume they can lecture him on legal matters. Officer Thompson, were you on duty at the time of the violation? No, Your Honor. However, as a sworn police officer, I retain certain responsibilities and authorities that require a flexible approach to civilian parking restrictions. The courtroom falls silent. Thompson has just implied that his status allows him to bypass laws applicable to everyone else, even when off duty. Officer Thompson, were you responding to an emergency or performing official police duties? Not at that precise moment, Your Honor. Yet law enforcement officers must always be prepared to handle situations beyond the scope of civilian capability, which demands operational flexibility. Judge Caprio maintains a neutral expression. Though seasoned observers recognize the signs of a judge preparing to deliver a lesson in legal principles. Officer Thompson, can you cite the statute or regulation that exempts off-duty officers from handicapped parking requirements? Thompson hesitates, clearly unprepared for a direct legal challenge. With all due respect, Your Honor, police operational protocols take precedence over municipal parking ordinances. Any seasoned officer would understand this. A heavy silence fills the courtroom. Thompson has just suggested, in a condescending tone, that Judge Caprio lacks knowledge of law enforcement procedures and the hierarchy of legal authority, but Thompson is not finished making what may be the most critical error of his career. Your Honor. Thompson continues, his voice growing openly defiant. I've spent 15 years enforcing these laws on the streets. I believe I have a deeper understanding of how they function in practice than someone who only sees them from the bench. The courtroom reacts with murmurs of surprise. Thompson has just challenged Judge Caprio's legal expertise, implying that street-level experience outweighs judicial knowledge. What the judge does next will carefully dismantle Thompson's arrogance and could have serious consequences for his career. Judge Caprio slowly removes his glasses, a deliberate gesture, signaling the weight of what's to come. He places them down with precision and fixes his calm, steady gaze on Thompson, the same expression that has earned him both respect and caution over the years. Officer Thompson, Judge Caprio begins, his voice composed, I want to make sure I understand your position. Are you suggesting that your 15 years in law enforcement give you more authority to interpret the law than this court? Thompson, misreading the pause as uncertainty, presses further. Your Honor, I'm merely pointing out that practical law enforcement often requires insights into legal applications that aren't obvious from a purely theoretical or academic perspective. Judge Caprio nods slowly, as if weighing Thompson's claim. I see. Officer Thompson, since you've questioned this court's understanding of law enforcement and legal interpretation, I'd like to ask you some questions about your case. He opens a thick file that's been on his desk. Officer Thompson, you said you have 15 years of experience. Could you tell me your current rank and assignment? Thompson straightens, pride evident in his posture. Sergeant, Your Honor, Traffic Division Supervisor. Traffic Division, the judge repeats. So you oversee the enforcement of traffic and parking regulations? Yes, Your Honor. Among your responsibilities, Officer Thompson, in your supervisory role, how do you instruct your officers to handle off-duty law enforcement personnel who violate parking regulations? Thompson hesitates, sensing a trap. Your Honor, we address each situation based on its specific circumstances. That's not my question, Sergeant. Do you tell your officers that off-duty police personnel are exempt from handicapped parking laws? Thompson's confident front begins to falter. Your Honor, there are operational considerations. Yes or no, Sergeant Thompson? Do you tell officers that a police badge exempts anyone from handicapped parking rules when off-duty? No, Your Honor. So, you don't. Because Rhode Island law provides no such exemption, correct, Sergeant? The arrogance visibly fades from Thompson's expression as he realizes he is being methodically exposed by someone who understands the law far better than he does. Your Honor, I believe in officer discretion. Judge Caprio interrupts, his voice firm and authoritative. You are not a patrol officer exercising discretion. You are a defendant in this courtroom, arguing as if you are above the law. There is a critical difference, But Judge Caprio is just getting started. What comes next will undermine Thompson's defense and reveal serious professional failings. Judge Caprio retrieves another document from his file. Sergeant Thompson, since you have questioned this court's understanding of law enforcement, I reviewed your professional record and your department's policies. Thompson's face turns pale, clearly unprepared for scrutiny of his police record. According to the Providence Police Department Manual, Section 4.2.3, off-duty officers are explicitly required to comply with all civilian laws and regulations. Were you aware of this policy, Sergeant? The courtroom falls silent as Thompson grasps the full extent of his legal and professional error. Your Honor. Yes. Judge Caprio continues, unyielding. Sergeant Thompson, your internal affairs record shows 2 prior reprimands for what your supervisors described as abuse of authority and unprofessional conduct toward civilians. Does that sound familiar? Thompson attempts to respond, but Judge Caprio presses on with precise authority. 1 reprimand specifically notes your belief that holding a police badge exempts you from rules that apply to others, as well as your disrespect for legal authority. The report recommends further training on professional boundaries and compliance with the law. Thompson's earlier arrogance vanishes, replaced by clear apprehension as he realizes his career is at risk. Your Honor, I fail to see how my personnel record is relevant to a parking ticket, but it is relevant, Sergeant Thompson. In my courtroom, you displayed the same abuse of authority and disregard for legal procedures that previously led to disciplinary action within your department. Judge Caprio's voice grows firm and commanding. You question my legal knowledge based on your 15 years of experience, implying that your badge grants special privileges. You exhibited the same superiority that has already affected your professional record. What comes next shocks the courtroom and places Thompson's law enforcement career in jeopardy. Sergeant Thompson, I am not only finding you guilty of the handicap parking violation and imposing the full $300 fine plus court costs, but I am also holding you in contempt of court for your disrespectful behavior and misuse of your official position. Thompson opens his mouth in disbelief. But Judge Caprio isn't finished. Sergeant Thompson, the judge continues, I am instructing court administration to forward a complete transcript of today's proceedings to the Providence Police Department Internal Affairs Division. Along with it, I am providing my recommendation that you undergo additional training in legal compliance and professional conduct. A murmur spreads through the courtroom as Thompson begins to grasp the seriousness of the situation. Judge Caprio stands, preparing to deliver his final point. I am also recommending that the police department evaluate your suitability for supervisory responsibilities. Your repeated misunderstandings of legal authority and the documented pattern of assuming your badge exempts you from the rules that apply to everyone else are deeply concerning. Thompson looks as though he might faint, fully realizing the potential consequences for his career. Your Honor, you can't ruin my career over a parking ticket, he protests. Sergeant Thompson, Judge Caprio replies calmly, I am not ruining your career. You took that step yourself. The moment you chose to argue with a sitting judge about the law while clearly showing a fundamental lack of understanding of both legal principles and your own department's policies. The judge approaches the defendant's stand, his authority unmistakable. Let me explain something about legal authority and professional respect, he says. I have practiced law for 45 years and served on this bench for 35. During that time, I have handled over 400,000 cases, including criminal matters involving police officers, internal affairs investigations, and disciplinary hearings for law enforcement personnel. His voice carries the weight of experience, like a commanding officer addressing a subordinate who has failed. In all those years, Judge Caprio continues, I have learned that the most dangerous officers are those who believe their badge places them above the law, above accountability, and above the very system they have sworn to uphold and protect. Thompson stands frozen, his earlier confidence completely gone. You came into my courtroom today thinking your badge and 15 years of experience would intimidate me. Judge Caprio begins. Instead, you've shown exactly why your department has disciplined you repeatedly for abusing your authority. The judge returns to his bench, preparing to deliver the final judgment. A police officer who disregards judicial authority is also one who risks disregarding constitutional rights. A sergeant who believes parking laws don't apply to him is the same sergeant who treats other laws as mere suggestions. Judge Caprio picks up his gavel. Sergeant Thompson, your $300 fine is now $800, including court costs. Your contempt citation adds an additional $500, but more importantly, you will be explaining to Internal Affairs why a sitting judge has serious concerns about your grasp of legal authority and professional boundaries. Thompson barely whispers, Your Honor. Please, I'm not finished. I heard you mention that 15 years of street experience gives you a better understanding of the law than judicial interpretation. The judge continues. Let me clarify. After 35 years of applying the law, I know that respect for legal authority is not optional. Professional humility is not weakness. And no badge, no matter how shiny, exempts anyone from accountability. Judge Caprio glances around the full courtroom, noting several officers who came to observe the proceedings. Let this be a lesson to all law enforcement officers watching. Your badge represents service, not supremacy. Your oath is to protect and serve, not to place yourself above the law. Your authority comes from the people and the Constitution, not from your uniform. He glances back at Thompson, who stands with his head lowered, visibly humiliated. Sergeant Thompson, Judge Caprio says firmly, I strongly suggest you take time to reflect on why respect for the legal system and humility before lawful authority are not optional for law enforcement officers. A badge does not place you above the law, it holds you to it. Judge Caprio strikes his gavel. Court is adjourned. The sound of the gavel signals finality, but the consequences extend beyond that moment. In the weeks that followed, it became clear why challenging judicial authority often results in professional ruin. As the courtroom emptied, Thompson remained at the defendant's table, staring at the citation that had cost him $1,300 and threatened his supervisory role. The arrogance that had carried him through 15 years in law enforcement had been systematically stripped away by a 76-year-old judge who had never raised his voice, Captain Maria Rodriguez. Thompson's commanding officer had observed the entire hearing from the gallery. She approached as he gathered his belongings, her expression a mixture of disappointment and concern. Sergeant Thompson, she said quietly, I watched the full proceeding. That judge displayed the kind of professional respect and legal understanding you've repeatedly failed to demonstrate in your supervisory duties. Thompson looked up, his earlier confidence gone. Captain, I didn't intend for things to escalate, he muttered. Derek, she continued, this is exactly what I've been addressing in your performance reviews. Your belief that the badge makes you exceptional, your disregard for civilian authority, and your misunderstanding of what it truly means to serve and protect. As Thompson left the courthouse, local reporters who had witnessed the scene followed him with cameras. His phone buzzed continuously with messages from colleagues who had been watching the live stream. The video capturing his legal downfall was viewed over 2 million times within the first 24 hours. Law enforcement blogs highlighted Judge Caprio's methodical dismantling of Thompson's arrogance as a prime Example of judicial authority effectively addressing police misconduct. Police departments began using the footage as a training resource, emphasizing humility and adherence to the law in law enforcement. The most significant impact, however, was within the Providence Police Department. Within days, Internal Affairs launched a formal review of Thompson's suitability for supervisory duties. Combined with Judge Caprio's judicial recommendation, the department decided to remove Thompson from supervisory responsibilities and mandate retraining in constitutional law and professional conduct. 3 weeks later, Thompson appeared before the Police Disciplinary Board. The record of his courtroom conduct, along with prior reprimands, portrayed an officer whose arrogance posed a real risk to public trust and departmental integrity. The board acted swiftly. Thompson was demoted from sergeant to patrol officer, placed on a 1-year probation, and required to complete 40 hours of continuing education in constitutional law, professional ethics, and community relations. When Thompson returned to the courthouse 6 months later, his transformation was clear. The defiant sergeant who had once challenged Judge Caprio's authority was replaced by a humbled patrol officer who understood that respect for the legal system is not merely professional courtesy, it is the cornerstone of legitimate law. Enforcement. Your Honor, Officer Thompson said, standing before Judge Caprio with genuine remorse. I want to sincerely apologize for my actions 6 months ago. I was arrogant, disrespectful, and completely out of line. The consequences of my behavior have shown me that wearing a badge means serving the law, not placing oneself above it. Judge Caprio nodded approvingly. Officer Thompson, your apology is accepted. What you've learned about humility and respect will make you not only a better police officer, but also a better public servant. The transformation of Derek Thompson quickly became a case study within Rhode Island law enforcement circles. He completed his probationary period and regained the respect of his colleagues through consistent professional conduct, humility, and strict adherence to legal protocols. Years later, Thompson would share with police academy recruits, Judge Caprio didn't end my career to shame me. He humbled me to save it and to protect the integrity of law enforcement. He taught me that the badge doesn't grant privileges, it carries responsibilities, the most important of which is respecting the legal system we've sworn to uphold. The video from that Wednesday morning became one of the most widely viewed moments of law enforcement accountability ever recorded, shared millions of times on social media. Police departments worldwide used it as training material, highlighting the importance of professional boundaries and respect for judicial authority. For those who knew Judge Caprio personally, however, it was simply another example of what made him exceptional: the ability to discipline with dignity, teach through justice, and turn professional arrogance into accountability. He showed that true authority doesn't stem from intimidation or rank, but from knowledge, preparation, and an unwavering commitment to the principles that uphold the legal system. At a time when relations between police and communities are often strained, Judge Frank Caprio demonstrated that accountability benefits everyone: officers, courts, and citizens alike. He reminded all who watched that respect for the law isn't only what we require from the public. It is something that those entrusted with enforcing it must show, especially when they think no one is observing.